What's up, SWAP? Welcome to our new series called Out of This World. And today we're doing Take Me to Your Leader. Now, when I was a kid, growing up, middle school, back in the 90s, it was kind of cool to want to be like someone in the band in sync. And for me, I wanted to be like Lance Bass. I wanted to get the frosted tip haircut. If you don't know what that is, you could Google it, or I could just tell you. What it was is you'd spike up your hair, and then you would get bleach, and you would bleach blonde the tips of your hair to get it to look like a frosted tip. Thank goodness my mother did not let me do that, but that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be like Lance Bass. I wanted to be like the guys in sync. And if we're all honest, all of us at some point have people in our life that we want to imitate, that we want to be like. Maybe it's a celebrity, maybe it's somebody that you know in real life, like a teacher or a coach. Maybe it's a person, just a fictional character that you think is pretty cool. But the reality is we all want to be like someone. And when we want to be like someone, we oftentimes imitate them. Just like I wanted to have frosted tips, maybe you want to be like Ariana Grande and you want to sing like her, or maybe you want to be as cool as Kellie and so you want to learn how to play the piano. Whatever it is, we try to imitate those people. We are all following something. And that leader that we're following, we will begin to reflect that. And so if your leader is popularity, that's what you're going to constantly be searching after. That's what you're constantly going to be going after. If your leader is the cool kids at school or that crowd that you want to be a part of, you're going to change the way you look. You're going to change the way you act so that you can begin to reflect those leaders. I've found in my own life that the only leader worth following is Jesus. He's been the perfect leader. He's never failed me. He's always kind. He's always gentle. He's always strong. He's been somebody that I can count on even in the most difficult moments of my life. So the series, Out of This World, is talking all about how do we live a life out of this world? How do we live a life that reflects the perfect leader? And that perfect leader is Jesus. I want to share a verse with you guys that illustrates and talks about how we can actually live in a way that shows and reflects our leader, Jesus. And if you have never made a decision to follow Jesus, I encourage you to talk to your small group leader. Come find myself or Kellie. We would love to talk to you about what it means to follow Jesus and what it means to make Jesus the leader of your life. Because again, He's the perfect leader. He'll never fail you. He'll always be there for you. And even in the most difficult things of life, Jesus is always there. He is a leader worth reflecting. And so, if you've never made that decision, I encourage you, talk to a leader, talk to one of us. We would love for the opportunity to chat about that with you. Here's the verse, Matthew 5:16. This is what it says. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and give glory to your Father in heaven. Did you see that? When we love Jesus, when we live for Jesus, we will reflect Him. We will reflect Him and point people back to Jesus. When we talk about take me to your leader, what we're talking about is pointing people back to Jesus. That's how we live out of this world.
I have so many memories of watching Toy Story from when I was little. It was all the rage when I was a little kid. I'm sure you guys have seen it too, but there's just a special place in my heart for the original Toy Story. And there's those little green alien guys, you remember those? And I think there's a part in the movie where they go, "Take me to your leader." Why are they saying that? It's because everyone knows that the person that you are following is the representation that you are trying to look like. We can learn a lot by looking at who we follow. I want to show you this Bible story. Jesus is hanging out in the temple, and some Pharisees and Sadducees come up to Jesus and they ask him a question. Now, the Pharisees and Sadducees were known specifically for how good they were at looking like their leader, God. They thought they were so good at following all the commandments and doing exactly what God asked. They thought they were so spiritual that they looked so cool. And Jesus really bothered them. They really did not like Jesus because Jesus challenged them by saying that they had a little bit more to work on than they thought. So we get to this story, right? Jesus is hanging out and the religious leaders come up and they want to stump him. They want to fool him. They want to trap him in a corner. So they start throwing questions at him, and Jesus is kind of like an expert boxer. He's bobbing and weaving, dodging all of their throws, getting out of the way. And I want you to look at what Jesus says here. It's in Matthew. Let's read it together. Matthew 22, 34 through 40. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees with his reply, they met together to question him again. One of them, an expert in religious law, tried to trap him with this question. Teacher, which is the most important commandment in the law of Moses? Jesus replied, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. So at the time, the religious leaders knew that the way to look the most like their leader, to look the most like God, was to follow all of the laws that were written in the Old Testament at the very beginning of the Bible. So they thought they had Jesus trapped. They said, which is the most important, Jesus? Which is the one that matters the most? They thought they had him in a corner where he wasn't going to be able to figure out which one to say. I can just imagine their jaws hitting the floor as Jesus comes up with this perfect response to what they asked. He says to love the Lord your God with all your heart and your soul and your mind. And then, more than that, he brings up a second one. He says the second is like it, and that is to love your neighbor as yourself. So not only does he blow them off their feet by answering their question, but he one-ups them by giving them something more to think about. Now, I would guess that a lot of you have heard that phrase in one way or another. Around church, Tyler and I like to say the phrase, love God, love people. It's 4 words, and it means exactly what Jesus said. What we're trying to do around here is to love God and to love people. And when we boil things down to such little phrases, they make them easier to remember. But sometimes I think we forget to stop and to think about how impactful that really is. That we are called to love God and to love people. That's how we're supposed to look like Jesus. I think we can all agree that it is a good thing to love God and to love people. We like to boil down that verse into those 4 words, but there is something that we often miss when we read that passage, and that is 2 little words. They are as yourself. Jesus says to love others as you love yourself. I think we like to skip over that. We like to just think about the love God and the love people. But I think especially as teenagers who are trying to look more like Jesus, those 2 words are something that we should really talk about. So Jesus tells us to love others as we love ourselves. I think that for a lot of teenagers, this is one of the hardest parts of the commandment. Now, I know, it's a little weird to hear a church person talking about loving yourself. It's not something we usually bring up in church, but here's the deal. Loving yourself is biblical, and it's something that we're going to talk about today. It's not go treat yourself, get some Starbucks, put on a face mask, eat all your junk food, and watch 4 hours of football games in a row. No, loving yourself looks a little bit different. We got 3 big questions that we are going to answer today. The first question is, what does it mean to love myself? The second is, how do I love myself? And the third is why. Why am I supposed to love myself? Let's dive into that first question. Now, what does it mean to love myself? We're not talking about that treat yourself kind of loving yourself. No, we're talking about something a lot deeper, right? I think a lot of the time when we think about what defines us, we often realize that we don't love ourselves very much, or at least I didn't when I was a teenager. Sometimes I don't now. Sometimes I think those mean things like, you're disappointing, you're not lovable, you're not worthy, right? Sometimes we have that reel of words in our head that tells us that we're not good enough, that we'll never be good enough, that we're not loved, that we're alone. Here's the thing, and I want you to listen to me when I say this. Those are not the ways that the Bible defines you. Those are not the ways that Jesus defines you. In fact, you are defined in the most opposite way of those words. We're going to look at a passage where we see how we are truly defined by the Lord. Let's read it together. Psalm 139, 13 through 18. You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion. As I was woven together in the dark of the womb, you saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. How precious are your thoughts about me, O God. They cannot be numbered. I can't even count them. They outnumber the grains of sand. When I wake up, you are still with me. See, I believe we need to redefine the way that we think about ourselves. Did you see what that passage said about the way that God defines us? It said that God's thoughts about us are precious, that he thinks all of the wonderful things about us, that he saw us in the moments where we were still in our mother's womb, and he still thinks about us today. That, my friends, is who you are. You are not the lies that you believe about yourself. I know it's really hard. I know it's hard to redefine the way that you think about yourself, but we must realize that the God of the universe sees us as precious and beloved. So now how? How do we do that? How do we love ourselves? There's a phrase in the Bible that I think really speaks well to this. We see it a lot of different places, and it's 3 simple words, and they are renew your mind. God calls us to renew our mind. You know why? Because he knows that in our mind we tell ourselves those lies. He knows that I think mean thoughts about myself instead of believing the things that God believes about me. And so he looks at me and says, Kellie, dear child, I want you to renew your mind, and I want you to think about yourself the way that I see you. Let's look at this passage together. Romans 12, 1 through 2. And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind that he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. Here's another one from Ephesians. Check this one out. Ephesians 4, 21 through 24. And since you have heard about Jesus and have learned the truth that comes from him, throw off your old sinful nature and your former way of life, which is corrupted by lust and deception. Instead, let the Spirit renew your thoughts and attitudes. Put on your new nature, created to be like God, truly righteous and holy. Here's a third one from Psalm 94. When doubts fill my mind, your comfort gave me renewed hope and cheer. Here's the deal. We cannot see ourselves rightly until we ask God to renew our minds, to help us see ourselves the way that he sees us. Honestly, guys, this is a process. You're not going to leave from SWAP tonight and go, oh yeah, I'm an expert at seeing myself the way that God sees me. You know how I know? Because I've been working on seeing myself the way God sees me since I was your age. And trust me, I'm not there yet. Take it one day at a time. But here's the deal. God promises to walk with you and to keep reminding you of those sweet truths of who you are in Christ. It's a daily battle to renew your mind.
Okay, so we answered, what does it mean to love ourselves? And then we went and we answered, how do we go about loving ourselves? So that leaves one more question. Why should we love ourselves? I think usually in the church we spend a lot of time talking about loving other people, and you know what? That's really important. That is really important. But it's also important to learn how to love ourselves the way that God loves us so that we can love other people. Let's look back at the original passage that Kellie read. Matthew 22:34-40. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees with his reply, they met together to question him again. One of them, an expert in the religious law, tried to trap him with this question, "Teacher, which is the most important commandment in the law of Moses?" Jesus replied, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all it demands of the prophets are based in these two commandments." Here's the bottom line. If you treat yourself like junk, you're going to treat others like junk. I know that seems like maybe kind of an extreme statement, but there's a lot of truth in that. Again, if you treat yourself like junk, or you view yourself as junk, or just seeing yourself as junk or unworthy or whatever it is, that's going to play it out in your life in how you treat other people. If we want to live lives out of this world, our lives are going to look different. Our lives are not going to look like maybe some of our friends at school. Our lives are going to begin to reflect our leader, and our leader is Jesus. And if we want to live lives out of this world, we need to allow Jesus to renew our minds, to change the way we think about ourselves, so that when we love ourselves, when we see ourselves the way that Jesus sees us, it allows us to love other people the way that Jesus loves. We need to allow God to renew our minds so that we can love like Jesus and we can think like Jesus. That's what it means when we say, "Take me to your leader." Let me phrase this in another way and ask this question. If you talk to your friends the way that you sometimes talk to yourself, would they still be your friends? Guys, if we want to live lives out of this world, we need to allow Jesus to renew our minds so that we can live for Him, we can love ourselves, and then in turn love other people. That's how we live out of this world.